Hello and welcome back to the Great Outdoors Photography Podcast. I am your host, Brent Bergherm, and this is episode 165. Hey, welcome back. It's great to be here once again, and this time we're talking about this image that I made. I'm calling it Freely Floating. I made it out there at the South Carolina Aquarium. It is the print of the month for February 2024, but also with this month, and I've decided to reach back and do this to all my other releases for the prints of the month, and that is adding another size. So the standard size for these prints of the month is on a 13 by 19 size paper, and then with a 1-inch border. So it's 11 by 17 inch print with a 1-inch border all the way around on that 13 by 19 paper. And those are limited to 50 prints, but I'm also now offering a larger size that is added to its own limited edition, and that is 36 by 54 inches with a 1.5 inch border. So that means it's a 33 inch tall, in this case it's tall, by a 51 inch image. And then, of course, it has the 1-inch border to take it up to 36 inches by 54 inches. So it just gives you a different option. If you wanted to have something larger, you're able to look at the larger size, has a much greater command on your wall, whether it's your home or office. And let's transition to just talking about the image. The image is a jellyfish. It's a little bit on the pink side of things. It's got a distinctly brilliant blue background, and it's just calm and serene. It makes me feel very at ease. There's not much in focus, and it's just all about this item of, let's look at these little details. Let's just get absorbed in the shape and the form. And to me, I just find it rather inviting and rather calming, rather soothing. So it sets a good tone for a space, and it just calms you a little bit, while also these colors are a little bit more vibrant, so it doesn't calm you too much. But still, they're a little bit punchy and a little bit, I don't know, again, I just want to say it's kind of calming, I guess. For some reason, that notion of calming just I don't know, I guess it must be the thing about this image, at least for right now, as I'm talking about it here tonight as I record. But anyway, let's take a look at a little bit of the background story. Happened in March 2018. So again, this is a little bit of a while ago. I joined the Improved Photography people. If y'all will remember, we had the Improved Photography podcast a while back. We had the Create Photography retreat that was attached to those items. We did that twice, once in Phoenix, one in Charleston, South Carolina. And this is the one that went to Charleston, South Carolina. I gave 3 presentations and I led 2 workshops at that event. But there was a group outing where we went to the South Carolina Aquarium. And so what did it take to get the shot? Well, there's a large tank of various jellies for sure. And as you're walking up, it's just this wall of glass. And that's kind of cool, as you're just seeing all these jellies swimming around, as I say, fishing around, all these jellies swimming around. And you are able to walk right up to the glass. Thankfully, this glass was fairly clean, especially on the inside. I can always rub and clean the outside, but the inside was quite clean too. If there's something, on the inside that's just causing some trouble, certainly you would want to move to a place where it's clearer. But also, given the fact that there's such shallow depth of field, whatever grime and whatever else is on the glass, it might cause your image to become a little more soft, but you're not going to really see that grime. So it's not that big of a deal, probably. But in this case, we were able to walk right up to the glass, and certainly there was a good collection of us. We just kind of were cut loose, as it were, in this aquarium. And there was at least 5 or 6 others with me that as we were shooting these jellies. And so the idea how to do it, place the camera right on the glass. Get the lens right flat on the glass. None of this angling or anything like that where you're trying to get a different angle or whatever, because you have such a very distinct reflection, and it's much brighter outside the tank than inside the tank. So whatever reflection is there is going to be hugely visible. It's just, you can't get away from it. And so you want to just get right up there. And if you have a lens hood, definitely use your lens hood because that will give you a little more, I guess we could just say a little more distance as it relates to away from the glass. But also, the lens hood is going to be bigger than your lens itself. And that might give you a tiny amount of the ability to then angle this way or that way and subtly shift things around. Now, especially if you've got one of those flexible lens hoods, I've seen those kind where they have a little rubber expanding thing where it stretches forward. And so you'd have a little bit of a flexibility in that nature. Well, shoot, go for that. That'd be amazing. But I didn't have one of those kind. But I would also say if you have the pedal type lens hood, not going to do you any good at all. So you want a solid lens hood that's just going to give you full on coverage right as you slam up against the glass. And then if you can, provide extra shading too. These various lighting conditions, you might still get a reflection coming off of the interior edge of the glass, and because that glass is pretty thick. And so if you can expand that shadow beyond just whatever it is that your lens is and your lens hood is providing you. So this is where your body comes into play. I'm kind of sort of a bigger, I'm 6'1", whatever. I'm not a really skinny dude, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And given that this happened, I think it was in March, it was kind of cool. So, I've got a bit of a jacket on, and I would be able to extend my arm out with my jacket and extend the shadow or the shade that I'm creating while still holding the camera with the other hand up next to the glass. And so I'm able to grab a little more opportunity to just say, give me a bigger shadow, kind of an idea. So if you have that opportunity, I definitely say go for that too. That would just help cut down on more reflections as we want to do when we're dealing with this. All right, my ISO was 1250 and the shutter 1/200th of a second and the aperture f2.8 and the lens was the 100 macro, the EF macro by Canon. That's an f2.8 lens, of course. And that's what gave us the excellent shallow depth of field, but also allowing a lot of light in comparatively to other lenses anyway. But I still had to do that 1250. And on the 5D Mark IV, while it does pretty good with the noise, on an image like this, the noise I think is going to be a little more easy to pick out simply because there's so many areas where it's just either that flat blue or you've got the really soft hues with the pink and the out of focus areas and all these kinds of things. It's supposed to be smooth. And when you have detail, the eye is looking at the detail and the noise will just get a little bit buried in those details. And it's not that big of a deal. But in an image like this, the noise can certainly be a problem. So I used Adobe's denoise function that's in Lightroom. Whatever they're saying, it uses AI or whatever anyway, that's what I did to denoise the image. And certainly it did a pretty good job, did quite well at maintaining those details I need to maintain, but also just getting rid of all of those other things that are noise oriented that would cause me to potentially get distracted from all of those smooth colors and those smooth transitions and the out of focus areas. And yeah. And we needed that because if I'm going to print this large, if I'm going to show it large on screen, most of the time on screen, it's low enough resolution. You're probably not going to really see that noise, but definitely when I print it, I just want your experience for your eye to not get tripped up by that noise. Of course, there's always the chance that you're not going to be close enough to the image. These are always different thoughts that are running in the back of my mind that you just got to be thinking about. You're probably not going to really ever be close enough to the image, especially if you were to get the bigger print where the noise will be even more prominent. But usually we step back when we have such a big print. We want to enjoy the overall impact of such a large print. And yeah, that's so it's probably not that big of a deal, but as a little bit of, I'm kind of the guy who really likes to pay attention to my technical details, because if the technical details can be taken care of, the creative notions, the creative intent, the creative value just has a greater opportunity to shine, I think. Probably a good way to put it. Let's think a little bit now about the design and creativity, or design and composition of the image. The primary idea, I should say, to me, it's all about colors. Kind of like last month, there was just the punchy colors and nothing was in focus for January's image. But these colors definitely are not as punchy. The blue is fairly punchy, but those pinks definitely not as punchy. And I have a little note here to talk a little bit about color theory ideas. What I wanted to just kind of base my thoughts there around was the notion of the color wheel. And I always talk in relations with the ideas of the RGB color wheel. Those are the primary colors we're always dealing with, whether it's in digital photography or human visual system. RGB are your primaries. And if we go to thinking about the print world, the graphic arts print world, maybe we're thinking about more of the traditional arts. You've got different color wheels that we base a lot of our thinking on, and base a lot of our discussions on, and those are great. I'm not discounting those color wheels at all. They absolutely, they have their value. They have their point. They have their place in our discussion on these things. But for me, I like to go to the source, as it were, and that is our cameras are based on RGB, our eyes are based on RGB. Everything about us is based on RGB, and so I tend to default to that color wheel. And so I have largely what I'm going to call complementary colors. Of course, I had to put a little asterisk with that because really the whole notion of complementary colors is that you have a color that's opposite of the other color on the color wheel. So the dominant background is this nice brilliant blue color, and it would need to be more towards the cyan tones if I wanted it to balance away to be opposite of those pinkish hues. Although again, cyan is opposite of red. There's nothing red here. If this were to be more towards the green tones, this blue more towards the green tones, then you might think it balances against the magenta tones here. So in one sense, I would use the term complementary colors to maybe talk about these, but I fully recognize and fully understand that's not truly the exact. These are almost analogous colors to where they are closer to each other on the color wheel, but they're not close enough to be really analogous colors. These particular colors, we're looking at some magentas and we're looking at some pretty solid, brilliant blues, because magenta is a mixture of blue and red. So when we look at the idea of magenta, it's closer to the idea of analogous colors and probably not so close to the idea of, let's say, the true complementary, which would be orange and blue. So blue is your dominant background color. Orange would be a complementary of that. To get orange, you mix, or yellow really, is the exact complementary. You mix your red and your green to get yellow, and then to get your orange, you throw in a little more green in there. So anyway, before I get too lost in the weeds in this, yeah, the reason I'm calling them complementary is because they just feel like they belong together. So it's less of the scientific definition of complementary and more of that, I guess I can use the term emotional, although that kind of, I don't think that necessarily works, but they just do feel like they belong together. They're working together. The water obviously is blue, makes sense for us with water. And then the jellies being this nice pink, it's soft and it's almost cuddly like. In this image too, we have a very distinct subject and we have a very distinct background. This leads us to be thinking, at least in some terms, to that whole idea of the Gestalt theory, where we're thinking about our figure ground. What is the figure? What is the ground? In this case, it is so obvious. There are zero opportunities, I would hope anyway, zero opportunities for us to get confused in this image as to what is the subject, what is the background. Now, you might be confused about what that subject is. If you've never seen a picture, if you've never been to the ocean, never been to an aquarium, you might not know what a jellyfish looks like. And you might look at that and just be like, what on earth is happening here? What did you photograph? So there's always that. But as far as knowing what that subject is and what that background is, it's extremely obvious. So in that regard, with the Gestalt theory, there's different ways I think that we can distill how we talk about Gestalt theory. And what I would say on this one is the most simplest of ways of talking about it. It is about subject or your figure. It is about ground or your background. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Is there anything else that leads into thinking where it makes it more because these objects are brought together? No, I don't think that's the case in this image. All right, let's talk about a little bit hierarchy and dominance and the focal point. Because it's such a simple composition, the hierarchy I think is very obvious. Bam, we have especially this, it's kind of in the center. We have this almost S curve. I guess it is an actual S curve starting at the upper portion of the image on the left third of the image. It comes down, it swoops to the right, comes to the almost exact center of the image, and angles downwards again towards the lower center of the image. We have this line that is largely in focus. This tentacle is largely in focus. And that was totally what I was going for on this image. I have other images where the fringe on the near edge is more in focus, so a lot of these tentacles are in focus, and that's kind of cool too. But I liked this one where that one single element was in focus. But I also then happened to get that one very bright dot in the central portion of the tentacles, very saturated, very bright, very everything is just really coming together strong there. That thing is very much a focal point to me for the image. So we have this very soothing S-curve, and then we got this little punch, this tiny amount, but it's a little punch of color. I kind of like what's going on there too. And of course, with the notion of dominance, the jelly is dominant because there's nothing else in the background. And then we just kind of get lost, I think, a little bit in these surrounding details. So while they aren't dominant per se, they are supporting those other elements that are dominant. Let's jump into Lightroom and take a look at the specific settings, and then we'll also get it printed. So here we are in the develop module, and we've got the temperature set to 72, 71. So it needed to become a little more warm is the idea there. And then the tint, just a +1. So that was pretty much right on. My profile, Adobe Landscape, that's what I like for my default everything I shoot. It is a little more punchy, of course, than the other options that are there, but I like to start a little more punchy with my color. And that saves me from having to go too much on that saturation slider. Although we can see this one, there's a lot there in that saturation slide. So let's now go down the list here. Exposure 0.8. So apparently it was underexposed a little bit. The whites I brought up a +21. As we take a look at that histogram, I wanted to bring some of those highlight values, really pushing it so that they didn't come fully into the whites region, because when I mouse over that whites slider up there in the histogram, it highlights a little bit. That's what I'm talking about there. But that spike in those highlights, it is right on that transition between the whites area and the highlights area. And I liked that. I liked where that was coming through for us. And then a little bit in the clarity, actually a lot of bit in the clarity, 40 in the clarity, vibrance of 14, and saturation of 29. All right, as we look at our color mixer, it says there's something here, and that's where I then took those blues specifically and brought those down just a hair. Then the purples are -6, the blues -14. And then as I look at my detail, just my standard items where I reset what Adobe does, so the amount being 25 there rather than the default of 40. And then my lens corrections, of course, doing their standard profile corrections and the like. And by doing that, just taking out a natural vignetting that is caused by the lens, especially at f2.8. If I were to take that off, we can see what it looks like, where we just have that vignetting happening. And I just did not want that. I wanted it really straight across. And then if there's any chromatic aberrations, this lens has such little chromatic aberration, but in case it happened, of course, they have it all profiled and it's all good. So that's it. There's not anything else applied to this image, and that's just straight up it. So yes, I did saturate this comparatively to what it was shot at, and of course with that Adobe Landscape profile, that causes those colors to boost a little more too. The biggest reason I did that, I really wanted these colors to just come to life. What I recall when I was there, now this was over 6 years ago now, but what I recall when I was there is just how beautiful and awesome they were. And to communicate that with that brilliancy of the blue, to communicate that just made a lot of sense to me. I wanted to be able to make that shine. I wanted to be able to really bring some kind of visual excitement to the image while not overcooking it. This certainly could be overcooked fairly easily, I think, and definitely I did not want to do that. All right, let's get to printing now. So I'm going to go over to my print module, and we've got it all set up here. Canon Pro 10, the A13 paper, and the 11 by 17 or 1-inch margins all the way around. So all that is ready to go. I just need to come down here and make sure that we're going to go not to a JPEG file, but we're going to go to the printer. We're going to go to 240 resolution. That's going to be just fine for this machine and this subject matter. And then as far as my profile is concerned, I am going on the Barita 310 for the Pixma Pro 10. So let's do that. And I'm going to go relative. Now, in the last one, when I did relative, I noticed some posterization type happening in the overall colors because there were some colors that were outside of the printer's gamut. They were in the photo for the Pro Photo color space, but they were outside the printer's color gamut, and so I noticed a little bit of posterization in the color. We'll always check a look for that, and if that happens, then of course I want to be cognizant of that and concerned about that. Certainly, I could go back to the develop module and I could do some soft proofing with this, but I'm just going to run with it as is because 96% of the time this isn't an issue. But it is still something I'm going to look for and see if it does rear its ugly head there. All right, so let's go ahead and hit this printer button. And we're going to verify and double check ourselves here with our quality and media here. So photo paper plus semi-gloss, yes. Rear tray, yes. Print quality high, yes. All right, here we go. And we're going to print. And so here in a few moments, the printer will have delivered the goods, and we've got another print out ready for our monthly print options here, the collectibles that I'm doing. Having a lot of fun doing these things, and I hope you are too as we go through and talking about what it is why I chose the image, why it speaks to me and things like that. Hopefully you find this to be a bit of an education for you too, where you can look at your images in this kind of light as well to say, well, what is it about that image? Why do I like it the way I like it? Because if we can identify those things, I talked about in this one, the simplicity of that S-curve going down the central portion of the image. If we can identify what we like about an image, then we can probably repeat that. We can recognize that when we're out in the field again, and we'll be able to experiment with that and see how that goes for us with whatever subject we're dealing with. If you don't like it, basically, well, then you know what not to do, and you can hone your efforts. And with whatever you got going on in an image, if you're like, oh, I like this image, except for that. Well, if we can identify it, then maybe we're able to identify that when we're out in the field, and we can adjust our approach the next time you're out in the field. At least that's the way I think about these things. That's the goal, the hope I have for you as you're doing this. To me, I view photography as always something that we can improve upon. Whether you're shooting because you're in a certain mood, whether you're shooting because you've got, I don't know what else you've got. You've got a goal in mind to communicate a certain thing. You've got a certain subject that might be something you've done 50 times. Maybe you've got a subject that is brand spanking new. Whatever the case is, there's always something new to learn about what you're dealing with and about how you're approaching these items. And that's just one of the wonderful things that always excites me and intrigues me about the creative process and about just trying to achieve something that, yeah, something that's just going to be awesome and glorious and awesome and wonderful and all that other good stuff. All right. It is just about. It has started to print. While that's printing, we're going to talk just a little bit more. A print for your home or office. I invite you to take a look at the website. The links are in the show notes or the description here. And once again, we are looking at two different sizes, 13 by 19 and 36 by 54. Now, of course, if you've got a custom need, by all means, I'm your guy. I want to do what I can to help you with your custom needs. Maybe you want this as a canvas wrap. I think this would be in a beautiful canvas. I'd be able to do that and get that out for you, get a quote for you. And that's another thing, though. I've got something new to talk to you about. I think this is going to be really cool, something I'm putting together on my website. Now, these pages on my website are not yet in the navigation item, in the nav area on the website, but they are available. Now, you can see on my view here, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, I've got this black bar across the top. You're not going to see that because, well, this is because I'm logged into the site. And I have it programmed to give myself these print services items so I can easily navigate around. You're not going to see these just yet, but if you were savvy enough, you would stop on the screen and you would see these URLs. You could take a look. Nothing, of course, is official until I put these in the nav bar. But this whole notion, the Fine Art Studio by me, Brent Bergherm, what I'm looking at doing here is utilizing my printer and helping you get prints of your images. And I want to be your print provider if that's something that you're interested in. Now, here's the first thing. If you're looking for a cheap price, I'm not your guy. I'm not going to be able to handle that. I can't do that. And if you want to have someone help you and walk through this process with you and deliver you an amazing print, definitely. Let's talk. I would love to help you do that. So I view my services, I view the idea of what I'm going for here as more of a boutique service where we're able to dive into making sure your images are going to come out just awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, let's take a look at a few of the pages here. Let's bring your art to life. Another thing I'm looking at offering, which I'm going to really nail it down tomorrow as I record this anyway. I'm going to nail it down tomorrow. That is my process for photographing traditional art. So if you're a traditional painter, if you know a traditional painter, maybe a mixed media artist, maybe you do, who knows what you do, some kind of collage, some kind of anything that is two-dimensional art, I suppose, even if it's three-dimensional, but if it's two-dimensional art, I would be able to photograph that in the studio, and then I'd be able to make reproductions for you. Certainly, I view this truly more as serving my local market rather than someone from Florida that would ship me their painting, their priceless painting that they did, or a painting that their grandmother did, or whatever the case is. I could see someone not wanting to do that by all means. I totally get that. But when it comes to the local market, I want to be able to provide that service. Maybe you've got a painting you freshly did. You could roll it up, like if it's on a canvas or on some paper, you could roll it up and ship it out. I'm happy to do that. And that's where I'm going to be nailing down that process. I've done these kinds of things. It's all mostly up here though. And I need to just put it out and really nail down that process. So I know what my charges will be. So I know how much I need to charge to do this job right. All right. So I'm going to be doing that. And of course, printing for photographers. So this page here, right now, it's all about those folks who are wanting to have their art done. But I need to have a link here or something like that for those of you that are photographers and you just need to have a quick print made, kind of an idea. Well, again, not a quick print, but a wonderful print. So to prepare your art, I take you through some items. I take you through some ideas here on what it takes to prepare your art. And this is where I do talk photography. first, because I think that, well, actually at second, maybe I should redo this. But anyway, I talk photography, I talk painters and mixed media, and then of course, digital artists. I've got all the information here. Whatever type of art that you're doing, I've got some ideas here that will help you prepare your artwork so we can have the best print possible. When we click on the photographers tab, since I know y'all who are watching and all y'all who are listening are most likely a photographer, at least. Anyway, talk about file formats and the like. As I mentioned, trying to be a little more of that boutique type shop, boutique type print experience. If you were to go to most of your online places, they're going to say, send us a JPEG that's sRGB color space. I can work with that. Totally, I can work with that. But what I am encouraging you to do is send me a TIFF that is the 16-bit, that is the at least Adobe RGB, if not ProPhoto. And I talk through the things here. I'm not going to read through all of them right now, but I talk through these different items. And when this is, officially released, which should be by next month, so by the March edition here, we should have this fully released and fully ready to go. You'll be able to read through this and choose what is most comfortable to you. Of course, I invite you to email me, and you'd be able to have a conversation with me, and we'll be able to dial in what's going to be the best option for you. So lots of different items, whether you want to do some soft proofing, whether you want to do some resolution checks on your imagery, what are you going to need to do? Some ideas for upscaling. And again, for those of you watching, the pages are not exactly solidified yet, but we got some ideas there. Again, for digital artists, if you do painting on your iPad, what have you, some ideas here for just making sure that we can get some good reproductions made from what you're creating there on your iPad. And then, of course, your painters and mixed media artists. Now, maybe you have the capability of photographing your painting. Send it on in. Let's take a look at it. I'll give you my feedback, whether or not that's something that's going to be well reproduced or what have you. But when I do a fine art reproduction, I'm going to have the studio lights going. Everything is going to be dialed in just as straight as possible, basically, where everything is measured, squared, leveled. I'm going to have my level there to make sure I get everything level and everything is just attending to all those details. The color control, where I'm going to be calibrating the light and the camera and the lens combo. Going to do a custom calibration just for all of that info. And then I'm going to be certainly taking a look at photographing a whiteboard so I can make sure I can compare in Photoshop and measure specifically, did I light this object evenly? I mean, I can measure it with my light meter, which is accurate to 1/10 of a stop accuracy. But maybe there's just subtle differences beyond that that are going to be important that I don't overlook. And so I'll be photographing a white panel just to make sure I didn't mess up. Then we've got the opportunity for thinking about, do you want to enlarge it? Do you want to make it a much larger reproduction than what you painted? Do you just want to make it the size that it is? All these different options are capable of doing and will affect how I photograph it in the studio. All right, you know what? The print, let me interrupt this topic here. The print has finished. Let's take a quick gander at that. And it is, as usual, just gorgeous. I haven't been able to identify it yet. But what I have been able to identify is when I print, I just get so stupid happy. I don't know why that is the case. That's just the way the Lord made me. That's gorgeous when it's on print. I almost feel like I should turn on the other light just so I can have more light on it. Just so it radiates a little bit more. But anyway, oh man, it just makes me happy. And I would love to print your stuff. I admit, maybe it's a little bit selfish. It's just going to make me happy to print your stuff too. I mean, anyway. Oh, it does make me happy. All right, so in Choose Your Media tab, the items that I have experience with, or actually there's one here I don't yet have experience with, but I'm going to very soon. I'm really excited about the Renaissance Cotton by Breathing Color. The Live Matte Canvas by Breathing Color. Oh, gorgeous, beautiful stuff. The Renaissance Cotton by Breathing Color is a more natural fiber. They're both natural fibers, but this one, a little bit more of that natural feel comes through. And so you just get a really awesome reproduction with it. And the way they talk about it is that it paints equally well as it prints. And that's one of the things I'm super looking forward to diving into, is taking my photos and painting them, basically. So I paint on canvas, I mount it, I then actually will paint directly on the canvas with hand rendered paint, with the idea that I'm going to just obliterate, as it were, the photograph, and it'll be effectively like a paint by number, but with the paint, coming through with my photographs as the background. And so I'm looking to use Renaissance Cotton for those items. I've got one going that was a near disaster, not because I put it on live canvas. I did put it on live canvas, or no, it was a different canvas. I'm sorry. It was a different canvas I have. But anyway, long story short, the color and the color was fine, but the overall approach to that particular item, it just did not work out at all. And so I just went a completely different direction with it. Anyway, Optical One by Breathing Color, pure smooth, beautiful for black and white prints. These two papers are amazing. Now, the Optical One does sublime with color as well. The Pure Smooth has a little bit of a natural tint to it, a slightly warm tint to it. So I'm not sure it would be for all of your color images, but it does okay. It is pretty good. The Barre de Photographique 2, like I say here, it's so matte, it's almost like a black hole. Light simply doesn't reflect off it. This is not a what do we call it? It's not a standard fiber-based paper in that it has the Barreda coating on it. So it has that alpha cellulose coating on it. But whatever they did to that surface, it is just wickedly matte. And it's beautiful. It's really good. I've got a note here, though, saying, it does tend to fall apart. In my opinion, it can fall apart if you're not careful in the shadows. So that's something I would be looking out for. If you wanted to try out that paper, we're going to look out for you, and we're going to be able to, make sure your image is going to look good before we pull the trigger, as it were. Now, the Rag Photographique by Canson Infinity, there's something about this paper. Now, the Optica One, Pure Smooth, and these others, their texture is so very, 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 very smooth. This one, Rag Photographique by Canson Infinity, I would characterize it as, I do characterize it here as supple. So while it's smooth, it's not like just wickedly smooth. It has a subtle texture to it as well. And it's extremely gorgeous. I love it. Especially when you're putting on some kind of image that has its own texture as well. And so that texture in the image can be enhanced by the extremely subtle texture that's coming through in the Rag Photographique. Now, when I say texture, don't think of this, if you were to look at it, don't think you're going to see like these dimpled items or this heavy tooth that the paper has. It's not like that. It's a bit rougher. That's all there is to it. It's a bit rougher if you were to rub your fingers over it, it's a bit rougher than these other papers that I'm talking about. So those are all the matte papers. And then the luster papers, the Barreda Photographique 2 by Canson Infinity. I've also got another one that I'm testing. Breathing Color has a Barreda that I'm testing, and it's on order, so I'll be testing it soon. I'm convinced that one's going to be amazing too. It's just they don't offer it in the 13 by 19 size yet, so I ordered a roll. So we'll see what happens. And of course, if you've got some media of your choice that you would rather have, you love this Handy Mule paper, you love that Moab paper, whatever the case is for what you want, I'm happy to work with you. Absolutely. Let's get that figured out. All right. And then lastly, I've got a page on digitize your art. So we go through the details about what it is to actually take your your painting, your mixed media, your whatever it is, and we're going to look at just helping you understand the process I go through to make that work. And I think I'm going to make that eventually into its own episode so we can talk about that in detail, because maybe that's something that you're interested in doing. You've got a painting of your, again, some relative, grandmother, what have you, maybe your own painting, maybe your wife or husband has done a painting. That's all good. Maybe your children do painting. That's all, to get good reproductions of that would be I think a good topic. So somewhere before June, probably, maybe I might have to do it after June because school is out in June and I could see that being a great summer project. So anyway, we'll do one eventually. And I think that might be helpful to you. All right, so the print is done. Everything is pretty much ready here. We've taken a quick look at the website and this newer service that I'm finally pulling the trigger on to make it happen. And certainly I'm very excited about. And let's wrap it up here. We've got ourselves a dose of inspiration. So here we go from Psalm 95, verses 4 and 5. He holds in his hands the depths of the earth and the mightiest mountains. The sea belongs to him, for he made it. His hands formed the dry land too. Of course, I had to choose something related to the sea because the image is a jellyfish. But yeah, I like this whole idea. He holds in his hands the depths of the earth and the mightiest mountains. The sea belongs to him, for he made it. That he made it. His hands formed the dry land too. Yes, he made everything. And as I've always, my common thread through why I'm a nature photographer, why I love the great outdoors, is I'm just always in awe about the massive amount of creativity that is evident in creation. These jellies, they don't have a brain. They don't have a set of bones. Yet in our own human classification and how we have studied things and how we categorize things, we still classify it as an animal. But he designed them. He made them. He saw value in making them just the way they are. I love that. Something as lowly as a jellyfish, he saw value in making it just the way it is. He saw value in making you just the way you are and me just the way I am. It's just awesome. Mind-boggling to me is what I wrote. If you received the email, if you're on the email list, that's what I'm kind of referencing to, the way I described it there in the email, which goes out at the first of every month and details these things. But anyway, it's why I love our awesome and magnificent Earth so much, and why I'm in awe of the Creator so much, because he is something that looks at the details. Naturally, I think I'm something of someone who looks at the details too, and I get excited about those things. Using a macro lens helps me see those details that you don't otherwise see. Using a still photograph helps me see details I wouldn't otherwise see, because the jellies are in constant motion. And you want them suspended in water so they can exhibit their beauty. If you were to take a dead jellyfish and lift it up, I don't think anything beautiful about that. But as a photographer of the great outdoors, or in this case, the great deep indoors, so to speak, we get to witness these things and we get to learn about these things as we photograph them. And in this case, truly, it's just a tiny amount. By no means have I dug deep into the science and everything else about jellyfish and all these things, but just learning a little bit about them. Whatever you learn from the display they have at the aquarium is awesome. Yeah, that's always exciting to me too. So it's just wonderful to be a part of this type of stuff. And then I get to make an image that honors and celebrates and highlights these things. That is just, there's nothing better. That really is what gives me the juice, as Ken Coleman puts it. But anyway. All right, Jane Austen, I'm borrowing a quote from her. What are men to rocks and mountains? I had to go with the opposite approach, kind of an idea of this text, just because That's the again, the kind of, it brings me back. Exactly. What are men to rocks and mountains? But what are men? What are you? What are we as the human race to the Lord above? We are everything. And these inanimate things, rocks and mountains, they are great. They are splendor. They are everything, as well as it relates to just awesome stuff. But we are special. And that's amazing. That's just awesome to contemplate. And that's something I'm always contemplating when I shoot something related to the great outdoors. All right, that is it. It's going to wrap us up for today. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for listening. And I invite you, please hit that share button, copy that link, send it to somebody, whether it's a text message, an email, maybe even better, post it on your social media so even more people can take a look at it. But let someone know why you're sharing it. Don't just post the link. I would invite you to think about, you're sharing this because you learned this. Was it because you learned a little bit about the idea of color and what it can mean, a little bit about the idea of the figure ground elements and just thinking about it in a different way? Maybe you learned about that you were able to put it into words, maybe about that notion of that S curve going through the central portion of the image, or you're able to put it into words about the magnificence of the great outdoors and the awesomeness that we have available to us on this fantastic earth of ours. So whatever it is, whatever that reason is, I invite you to share it out there. I invite you to let someone else know how it affected you and what you learned, and they'll certainly be able to learn something too. Anyway, again, thanks so much. It's been awesome, and we'll see you in the next episode. So long for now. God bless, and until then, happy shooting.